Okay, so over the last couple of weeks, we've looked at demand and we looked at supply. So the time has now come to combine them and try to explain how prices are determined. And there's a very important concept that you need to understand as part of this, and this is the idea of equilibrium. Now, equilibrium isn't just an economics term. Equilibrium simply means a situation with no tendency to change. So if we look at this pen, just move that down slightly, and there you can see its top. There's the pen. The pen is in equilibrium. Unless an outside force comes to apply to it, nothing's going to happen. It's going to sit there. Yeah? Now the pen is out of equilibrium, and now it's back in equilibrium again. And equilibrium is very important in economics because, according to neoclassical economic theory, market prices will reach an equilibrium situation. So there may be forces that mean that prices are rising or falling, but eventually those forces will balance out, and it'll leave us in a stable situation. A situation where, as physicists would say, all forces are balanced. So when you hear the idea of equilibrium, or an equilibrium price, all that means is a price that is currently stable. There are no forces on it causing it to either rise or to fall. So let's have a look then at supply and demand. So how might this idea apply to what we've so far seen? So what we're going to do is we're going to put supply and demand together for the first time. So here is quantity. On this axis, this can be quantity demanded or quantity supplied. It doesn't really matter because we're just measuring, we're just counting the number of units. And up here we've got price. Now what we know is that the demand line, demand curve, demand function slopes downwards from left to right. At high prices, demand is lower. So high price is associated with a low level of demand. Whereas for supply, it's low prices. When prices are low, supply is also low. And as price rises, that creates an incentive for firms to supply more. So where are we going to end up? And at high prices, the same high price, supply will then be high. So where does that take us? I think there's a natural tendency for everybody to kind of go, oh, look, two lines cross, and therefore that means something. And that's usually the case in economics. But we need to analyse more closely exactly what it is that's going on here. So let us imagine that price is down here at P1, or let's just call it £10, for the sake of argument. Let's imagine that this is some sort of commodity. So this is the price of rice or something. What we can see is that at £10, producers are only willing to supply 100 million units. And we talked about that before. We said, although demand at that price is for 300 million units, suppliers aren't willing to supply because they can't make enough profit. That was our argument. That if this is the market for rice, in order to meet that level of demand, they'd have to use extra fertilizers, or they'd have to cultivate margin. They'd have to put lower quality land into use that would cost them more, require more labour, and so on. So they're only willing to supply more if they're offered a higher price. So what we have here is a situation where there is excess, which means too much, demand. Because demand is at D1, 300 million units, whereas supply is only at S1, 100 million units. Now it's not equilibrium, because there are these, there are various multinationals trying to buy rice, and there are suppliers. So what's going to happen is that these multinationals, they're going to bid. They're going to say, well, hang on a minute. It's like, I want your rice. I'll pay you more than £10. And as they do so what's going to happen is that the competing buyers, the people trying to get hold of this, or imagine it was housing, same sort of story. There are lots of people trying to buy houses and not enough houses available. Let's imagine that was, that this is say £100,000 or something for houses. There's lots of demand, as a result of which the people trying to buy them will make higher offers. They say, well, okay, I'll give you £150,000 then, go on, I'll pay you more. So what happens as a result is that firstly, some people drop out of the market. So instead of demand being at D1, demand falls to D2, or demand falls to 250 million units, or whatever it is. But at the same time, of course, some producers who couldn't previously make a profit, they will now enter the market. Supply will rise to, say, 150 million units. But there's still excess demand. There are still more people trying to buy than there are units available. Therefore, the price will rise again to, say, 170. If this is housing, £170,000 or £170 a tonne. And as a result, what's going to happen is that demand contracts again. We've got contraction in demand to, say, 180 million units, and expansion in supply to 170 million units, or whatever it turns out to be. But eventually what's going to happen is that price is going to rise sufficiently far. It's going to rise to this level here, which is, say, £200 or whatever. At that point, supply equals demand. Supply is 175 million units. Demand is 175 million units. And therefore, there's no further upward pressure on price. There's no reason for price to rise because there is no excess demand. So we can call that point the equilibrium point. Or £200 is the equilibrium price. And it's in equilibrium because it's not tending to change. It's not tending to go up, and it's not tending to go down. We can do the same thing. If price was, if for some reason, price was well above equilibrium. Oops, that's P, sorry. There's supply, there's demand. Suppose price was up here at P1. The situation here would be that producers would be thinking they'd be able to get a high price. They'd be willing to supply S1. But at that price, consumers are only willing to buy D1. And we have excess supply. We have too many, again, if we imagine this is housing, too many people are trying to sell their houses relative to those who are willing to buy. As a result of which, the buyers can undercut one another. They can simply say, sellers, well, look, the sellers will have to undercut one another. The buyers will simply say to sellers, well, look, I'm not willing to buy at that price. So sellers will kind of go, oh shit, well, I better cut price then. So what starts to happen, is that in order to sell their houses, the sellers cut prices to, say, P2, or if that was £800,000, they cut them to £750,000. As a result, which some sellers drop out of the market. They're not willing to sell anymore. But some people realise that they're willing to buy, they can afford to buy. So we get an extension in demand and a contraction in supply. So the same thing's going to happen. You can see exactly the same as when prices were rising a minute ago. Prices are going to continue to fall. Price falls to P3, supply falls again, demand rises again. And remember, because there's a change in price, we're moving along. There's no need for these lines to shift, because it's only the price itself that's changing. And price will therefore continue to fall until we reach a situation here, at whatever price this is, 650 or whatever, at which supply equals demand. So there's no reason for price to continue to fall now, because there's no excess supply. So equilibrium occurs where prices are, other things being equal, stable. There's no excess demand causing prices to rise, and there's no excess supply causing prices to fall. So where supply equals demand, that will be an equilibrium price in economics.